Hello and welcome to today's video. Very excited today to bring you Creator by Steve Chandler. This book really spoke to me as I was reading it, I think because of Steve's writing style. He's so funny and witty and down to earth, and it really just kept me reading as I was reading the book. I pulled out some of the main ideas from this book as I see it, and I'm trying to put them into a mind map so that you guys can better understand them. But before we get into it, let's talk about Steve Chandler. And who the heck is Steve Chandler? Well, he's the best-selling author of multiple different books, including Right Now, Death Wish, Crazy Good, Time Warrior, and 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself. But he's also very prolific. He's got 30 plus other books at the time of me doing this video. He's also known for being an unorthodox personal growth guru. And not only is he a personal growth guru, but he also teaches other life coaches. And after all, unorthodox, is there any other way to be? You can see in this mind map I have a lot of different colors, and I normally am only doing the black lines, but I figured with this book it really went with unorthodox patterns to use a bunch of different colors. So he's very down to earth and humble. He's funny, witty, wise, and his writing style really showcases, I think, his personality. I've watched a couple of interviews with him. So he's helped thousands of people transform their lives and businesses. And the main quote that I pulled from the book that will explain what's going to be kind of fleshed out in the subsequent points is this. And it's a fairly long one. And what you'll notice about this mind map in particular is that there's many of these long quotes, because there's no way that I could break this quote down into all of the different points and have it be any more eloquent than what Steve has presented in the book. So I figured pulling out some of those best points and then giving you guys some action points would be the best way to go about this mind map. So without further ado, I'll start with the first quote. And the first quote goes like this: "The more spiritual work and study I did, the more I saw that creativity and the life force were one and the same. And it was a force running through everybody and not just a chosen few." So you can see that we're talking about life force, and that's, the muse, as Stephen Pressfield talks about it. It could be God, it could be anything that you use the word for. He also goes on to say that we were experiencing the same kind of higher power that the sages wrote about, a power without upper limits. You could call it a superpower, just what I longed for as a kid. Maybe my yearning and longing and reaching out for Superman as a boy was not a total delusion, and boy, wouldn't that be nice. If I were to write an adventure comic book today, I would see if I could introduce a new superhero. My comic book superhero would be you. So you can start to see a little bit about what the book is going to be talking about and what we'll be talking about in our points down below. We're going to show you exactly how you can become your own personal superhero. And he goes on to say that I know that's not a remarkable name for a superhero. You is not a great name for a superhero. So let's call you something else. How about this? Do you know how the movies always acknowledge the creator of various superhero characters? For example, Wonder Woman's creator was William Martson. Imagine how powerful he must have been. It's one thing to be Wonder Woman, but it's quite another to be able to create Wonder Woman. And you can start to see that we brought that word create into the entire quote here. And that's really what the book is going to be about, how creativity and you creating is your superpower. He goes on to say that if these characters like Wonder Woman, Superman, and Mighty Mouse are so powerful, just imagine how much more powerful their creators must be. That's the ultimate superpower right there, the ability to create. And this might seem a little facetious because obviously superheroes aren't real and they're not actually making that giant impact that they do in the movies on people. But even if you take this as a realistic approach, Wonder Woman, Superman, Mighty Mouse, they've been seen by so many people. Specifically, they have motivated a ton of children, and they've motivated a ton of people to try and strive and reach for their own personal superpowers, and I think that's just great. That in of itself is obviously a superpower. He goes on to say, as the last part of this quote, I'd call that hero Creator, and you can see that the title of the book has come full circle here. And the adventures I'd present would show you that it's all based on a true story, the story of you. And that's exactly what we're going to start doing with some of these points down below. We're going to show you that this is really based on a true story, the story of you, and that you being the creator and you being creative is your superpower. So first we're going to talk about two questions. And the quote that spurred this on was that it gives me a greater understanding of why my friend and life coach, Steve Hardson, used to ask me two questions over and over in the course of our work together. When I described a problematic situation in my life, he would listen carefully and then say, okay, given that that's the situation, what would you like to create? And you can see that's a very interesting question. Normally people would say something much different. He says, notice how it wasn't, how do you want to solve that problem? As if the problem had all the power by itself. As if the problem were a bomb that we had to carefully disarm. He never saw the problem as having the power in the situation. He always saw creativity as having all the power. And together, we didn't really have to solve anything. We didn't need to. What we created made the problems fade from relevance. Very interesting. Think about a time in your life where you've had some type of a problem, and what you were focusing on and what your brain was continually ruminating on was the actual problem that you had, rather than the creative solutions that you might be able to come up with in order to solve that problem. So that's question number one. Given that that's the situation, what would you like to create? And obviously there's a little bit of subtext there. What would you like to create to solve that problem? The second question he'd always ask me would appear whenever it didn't look like I could do something scary that I needed to do. So he has a little bit of fear around the creation that he needs to make. Instead of telling me what I needed to do, he would always ask me, who do you need to be? Because he always knew. And I learned through practice that I could create that being. I could create who I needed to be. And this goes into the Dilt's logical levels a little bit here, which we'll talk about. But he's basically showing that identity is what dictates what you do on a daily basis. And if you have the identity of someone who is able to overcome a problem or create a solution to the problem, then you'll be able to create that solution much easier. Or if you have the identity of someone who can't create or can't solve a certain problem, you'll continually keep running your head into the wall. So here's the two questions and how they would work. If you simply have a problem, ask yourself, what would you like to create? Everything that solves a problem was first created. So you can really think about all of the different things that are happening in your life, whether it's this microphone that I'm speaking into, this computer screen that I have the mind map on, or even mind mapping itself. These creations, we think of them as objects, but they're all really creations by someone very smart in a specific field. They created that solution to the problem. And he also says that every problem really is an opportunity to create. So every problem you have is not a problem, it's an opportunity. Very interesting. All good businesses are started by creating a solution to a problem. And that's often what I think about too when I'm thinking about starting a new business or opening up a new branch of a business that I had before. What are the problems that I'm currently struggling with? And are there solutions out there already? And if not, is there a solution that I could create and share with other people that might have a similar problem? It's a great way to think about how to start a business. All good goals are achieved first by setting out to create a solution to a problem. So any of the goals that you have, generally, you're trying to create something that will solve a current problem that you have or a current lack that you perceive. So you can see that this is all leading back to creation. And then the second question, if you have a problem, would be, who do you need to be? Very interesting. Identity is the North Star of habit change. And I believe that's from Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this is where we'll talk a little bit about the Robert Dilts model. This is what I based my coaching model off of, and this is what my self-coaching course is really all about. You can see that it's set up similar to a pyramid, with the base of the pyramid being environment, and then we move up to behavior, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about creating. Creating is a behavior. And then we move up to capabilities, values and beliefs, identity, and vision at the top. So you can see that this pyramid really runs both from the top down and the bottom up. If you change your vision, therefore you would have to change who you are in order to change your vision or to move towards your vision. You'd have to change maybe what you believe in if you change your vision. You'd have to gain new skills or capabilities in order to change your vision. You'd have to definitely do different behaviors in order to achieve a different vision. And quite often your environment that you're currently in is not conducive to you being able to accomplish your vision. And you can see that it really runs all the way uphill. If you change your vision, all of the things below it need to change. And if you change your behaviors, environments, capabilities, values, and beliefs, your identity is going to have to shift right along with them. So you can see that who do you need to be? If you start by changing who you need to be, your vision is really changing and solving and creating a solution to the problem. Your identity is the first thing that you need to change. And if you change your identity up at the top, it's much easier. The values and beliefs, capabilities, behaviors, and environments really just end up falling into place. Much, much easier than changing your environment to try and change your identity is changing your identity in order to try and change your environment. A final quote here about the two questions is, whatever your identity is now, you only believe it because you have proof of it. That's James Clear from Atomic Habits. And that's also kind of echoed in What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Dr. Shad Helmstetter, that the mind only believes what you're repeatedly telling. So if you're looking to change your identity, you're going to have to continually learn who you need to be in order to accomplish your goal, and then continually restate it to yourself. The next point that I wanted to talk about was gardening, and I just thought it was perfect that the gardening tree looks green in the mind map. But the quote that really spurred this one on was that he says, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, as the gardener, by severe pruning, forces the sap of the tree into one or two vigorous limbs, so should you stop off your miscellaneous activities and concentrate your force on one or a few points. And I thought that that quote was absolutely perfect, especially in today's day and age where everyone needs to be everything to everybody. So what you could do is you could think about, why should you do that? Does that lead you to being creative? Does that lead you towards something that you would like to create? And how many things can you possibly create at a time? Can you prune down your tree in order to create something great? Or would you rather have a million branches coming off and not be able to focus and dedicate yourself to growing one specific branch so that you can create something really beautiful? The quote goes on to say, because more creative power is now available for the few points that are really important to you. See, after you cut off some of the branches, that creative power is now available. So the pruning is a great idea. Look at the dying branches the gardener took away from the tree. Doesn't the tree look healthier and more beautiful? Obviously, if you just let a tree grow in your front yard, it might have a bunch of branches because its one and only goal is to try and get as much possible sunlight on all of its branches. But if you let all of the sap just run directly towards the one or two large branches that you want to grow, you'll be able to shape that tree in your vision and it'll grow much, much quicker. The final part of the quote is that we don't glamorize severe pruning, right? So he's talking about society. We always want to be busy. How are you? I'm busy, right? Rather than I'm focused, or rather than I'm creating, we talk about how busy we are. We don't even want to talk about it much, even though, upon further review, it seemed to be profoundly creative. So you'll see all of the most creative business people, all the most creative artists that you know, they're really specializing on one or two things. They are not spreading themselves very thin. And that's after going through what we call the pruning process. And what you want to ask yourself is, what is your main focus right now? How many miscellaneous or less important branches are attached to that main focus that you're doing? So some examples are, how much is social media attached to what you're doing? How many side projects are you doing? How many social situations are you getting yourself into that don't have anything to do with you growing and focusing on your main focus? What products or services are you focusing on maybe in your business or consulting practice that are not your main focus? And how can you cut those off and prune them back in order to focus on your most valuable and most important main focus, right? So how can you cut those branches off such that you'll be able to focus more life force towards your ultimate vision? And there comes back that word of life force. And the sap is really just a metaphor for life force. And it works the same in humans as it works in trees. think about what the real benefit is to having those branches, right? How much value are these things really giving to you, your business, etc.? Then think about the potential benefit would be to focusing on your most important branches, right? So if you spend an hour on social media every day, it might give you a certain amount of benefit to your business. But what would spending time on your products and services, which is maybe your main focus at that point in time, if you spent that hour on your products and services, it might give you an exponential return. And this is essentially the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle, saying that 80% of the things that you're doing are giving you 20% of the results. And what Steve is basically talking about is trying to find what your 80% is and focusing on that, or trying to find what your 20% is, and focusing as much as that as possible. The final part I wanted to say here is that you can think about this in more than just business, right? I was talking mostly about business through this whole thing, but you can think about this in health. You can think about this in relationships. You can think about this in a lot of different ways in your life. And it's important to use that 80-20 principle in a lot of different ways in your life in order to maximize the things that are giving you the most value in your life. The next point is the blue point, and I'm very excited about this one because this one was really shifting for me. It really shifted a paradigm that I realized I had been stuck in for quite a while. And I hope it does the same for you. So the quote that really brought this one on was, he says in the book, "I have known of new coaches who start their panicky day with meridian tapping for abundance, deep yogic bellows and breathing for elevated mental states, aromatherapy for valor, and petitionary prayers to support the supernatural so that they might be blessed with exceptional, extraordinary powers that they will need to make this impossible dream job work." Isn't that just so eloquent? And it makes total sense. I mean, how many of us are thinking that we need all of these things to make us productive, thinking we need all these things to have us, to give us the energy that we need, because we've built up this amazing, impossible dream that we have, so that it would be so hard. The people that have accomplished this are so much better than we currently are. And you'll see in the next couple of quotes that it really just isn't true. He says that, hey, just slow down. See if you can get a hold of yourself, right? See if you can get a hold of yourself. Very important. Do you need to scare yourself to make this profession work out financially? And why would that be true, right? So many of us, right? We see this a lot in Western culture, and it's not just with the professions, although a lot of us are motivated by the potential for failure, which definitely we're using failure as a potential motivator, which is not the way you should motivate yourself. But often we're drawn to making our goals big and grandiose, right? We're thinking about, oh, that person is so much further ahead than me. Oh, that person has worked so much harder. Oh, that person is especially talented in whatever realm I'm trying to be successful in. And it's not because we necessarily need them to be, right? We don't necessarily need to set those crazy goals. And most often the goals that we set are completely attainable, because quite often people have the problem of not believing in themselves enough rather than believing in themselves too much. But often it's because we need an excuse as to why we aren't currently excelling in that goal, right? And obviously this quite often happens, right? You set out on a new venture, you set out on a fitness craze or anything like that. You make it out to be much, much harder because you are protecting yourself in a weird, perverse way. Essentially, you're saying that this is so difficult and that's why I haven't been able to accomplish this certain thing. And it's not, other than I just started paying attention to this. Oh, I just found out that I just realized that, hey, I need to get in a little bit better shape. And it's going to be a relatively long process, and I'm committed to it. But I'm not taking any drastic measures towards that goal, right? And the reason that this is happening is because it's your ego trying to protect yourself. The bigger and more grandiose the goals seem in your mind, right? There's two different things that you can do. I think I wanted to talk about this a little bit as well, is that you can make yourself believe in yourself much, much more. And I think that's very, very important. And that's what a lot of the goal setters talk about. But you also need to believe that the goal isn't actually as hard as you're making it out to be, because that's the truth as well. And that's your ego in action, making it seem like it's so big, so that, one, you have a great excuse for why you can't accomplish it. And then two, it gives you more satisfaction if you do actually accomplish the goal, which it constantly plays out that by setting your goals so big and grandiose and then being burnt out by blaming your approach as opposed to committing and sticking to the course. Very interesting, right? quite often what we'll do is, instead of saying, I need to stick with this for 3 more months, 6 more months, a year, 5 years maybe, right? What we'll do is we'll try and find tips, tricks, and that's what the media is really playing into nowadays as well. So Steve continues to go on with his quote about relaxing and doing the job, and he says, my experience says that is not true at all. The coaches I've seen, and you can use coaches as whatever profession or whatever goal you're looking at, just relax and they do their jobs. They do the doable. They do the doable. They learn the simple systems used by other successful coaches. They get up for work each day, just like other people do, and they practice their profession, just like an accountant or lawyer would do. So you can see inside the quote, there's a lot of different things. They do the doable. They choose things that they know that they can accomplish. They don't try and bring their beliefs up to match the way that they built up these crazy goals in their head. They simply just do the things that they know that they can already do. And they learn the simple systems used by other successful coaches. Very important, right? You can always learn from other people who have been through the thing that you're looking to go through. They're okay feeling like average people, having an average day, making an average amount of progress towards professional strength and prosperity. Rather than taking a daring leap, they just settle in. From there, the good career gets created. The system is that simple. Simply settle in. And I wanted to really double down on this one, and I'm going to give you 3 other books that talk about this in particular, because I feel like this isn't talked about enough in our day and age, about how it's not that person on Instagram who is further ahead than you that you need to be looking at. It's at yourself and continually working towards your goal and settling in. So this is talked about in Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's the essence of becoming a craftsman, and instead of focusing on the outcome, you're focusing more on the process and becoming very good at the specific process. And it leads to more fulfillment than if you just focus on the outcome and how far away it really is. And this works not only just for people who are actual craftsmen, but also knowledge workers. Can you get incrementally better at your job so that you become the type of person that deserves the success that you need, as we talked about up in the 2 questions before? Your identity changes and you actually change as a person. And David Schwartz also talks about this in his book about stickability. And I've done a video on that. I recommend you go and check it out. I will link it down below for you. But he says that 95% of ability is just sticking to something. And boy, isn't that the truth. You know, if you're not naturally talented at something, if you aren't naturally a very, very intelligent person, if you just stick to something, quite often you will be able to accomplish whatever it is you're looking to accomplish. And Stephen Pressfield also talks about it in his book, The War of Art. He says, be professional, show up, do the work, and don't pay attention to the outcome. Specifically, he shows up and he works at a specific time and works until another specific time, and he doesn't even really look at what he has accomplished. If he's accomplished 5 words or 500 words, he's just happy that he went in and he did the work. So that was relax and do the job. And what we're moving on to next is the power of checklists. And the quote that really spurred me wanting to talk about this one was, just like you see the pilot on your commercial airline flight settling in prior to the flight, right? He's starting to relax. He or she smiles at you, he settles in, shares some easy conversation with the attendants and the co-pilot, and then goes through the routine instrument check. You have to think about how potentially dangerous that job is, not only for himself, but all the people that are on his flight. Anything could possibly happen with that plane, and he would be responsible for many, many lives. And you have to think about how scary that job is, and how pilots aren't worrying all the time, right? He says the pilot doesn't walk through the jetway hyperventilating, fingering the rosary beads and yelling, "Oh dear Lord, I hope I'm up to this. God help me and my family." At least we're hoping that that's not what the pilot is doing. It's never happened to me before, and I hope it hasn't happened to you. So he talks about, so how about we just set that whole depressing cycle aside and do this profession like any other. So this one really, this power of checklists really connects to relax and do the job. We'll just do the blue collar work. Maybe carry a notebook everywhere, learn the mechanics of a profession, and have fun whacking away at it, right? That's half the fun, is learning how to be great at whatever you're setting out to do. We can even be okay working from the inside of our comfort zone, right? We don't have to push ourselves too much further than what we're comfortable with, doing what's doable and being happy with having a very enjoyable and average day. So many people that I meet and I talk to with my coaching are constantly worried that they didn't have a great day. Well, what if you just got used to having an average day? Because you can only string so many great days in a row together before you have a bad day. And then what often happens to those type of people that are only content when they have a great day is they'll start to dwell on it. And that's not the way that you want to go about your life at all, right? So from there, we can serve a ton of people very well. It works for me and all the successful people that I know and I work with. There's a quiet power inside this approach. And it's from that relaxed, enjoyable, doable experience of my workday that the most creative ideas arise. I've talked about this quite a lot before. When do your most creative ideas arise? For me, it's not when I'm at my desk. For me, it's not even when I'm creating these mind maps. But what's happening is after I go out for a walk with my dog, and it's just a normal, average part of my day. Nothing is miraculous or beautiful about that walk every day. But that's when I get my most creative ideas because I'm relaxed. It's enjoyable. But it's not anything special. So we'll go back up here and talk about this cycle is what will lead you to choose a completely illogical path in order to jump to success, instead of following a clear and defined path and learning along the way. This is also what makes you very susceptible to marketing, right? People will say, I have this way that will be much easier for you now, and all you have to do is buy my course in order to do it. And while some people, if they have a very well-researched course and it actually is someone who's been through it before, that can be great. But quite often what we're doing is we're looking for people who are selling us a quick fix. And I would be very tempted to look at the credentials of that person and research some of the work of that person who says they have a quick fix for almost anything. Because quite often what will happen is it's a long process of being able to make small changes at a time, right? And the way that you go about this, it's kind of like playing the lottery. It doesn't connect because even people who hit the lottery end up losing it all because they haven't learned to the identity of someone who deserves it, right? Remember the who do you need to be question before. If you don't work and commit to the work and commit to some of these checklist type items that we're talking about here, if you end up getting some weird stroke of luck, you won't deserve it. And by that, you will probably lose it. So the next point on checklists is by Atul Gawande from Checklist Manifesto, his book. I'll be doing a video on that in the near future. Checklists establish a higher baseline of performance, right? Very interesting. That pilot that has, like we talked about before, a very scary job. It doesn't seem like it's scary, but that's because it's a checklist that they follow. It gives them a higher baseline of performance. If they didn't have a checklist and they didn't have any idea what switches they needed to flip and et cetera, it would be very hard to be a pilot and much more stressful. He also says that checklists are a quick and simple tool aimed to aid the skill of the professional. That's what Stephen Pressfield was talking about before. Here are the metrics that I need to track in order to ensure that I'm getting further and further towards my goals, right? They make it so that you don't need to be constantly thinking of new and complex ways to solve the problem that's already been solved. And that's the great thing about checklists is you can create them and they're living and breathing. It's a checklist that will allow you to relax into the work and follow the system. So you can create a checklist of how you see the world right now. And as you go about working that checklist, you'll notice little things that you either need to add or to take away from your specific checklist that you've created for yourself. And it's a great way of learning because you don't need to learn something brand new every single time. A checklist can learn and live and breathe with you. And when you learn from one client or one situation, then you can change it for all the other potential situations that are going to come up in the future. So what I need you to think about is what checklists are you using right now, even if they're unconscious checklists? Do you have them written down? Are they actually checklists? Or are they just, I need to do all of these things? Are they a to-do list? Or are they a checklist, a repeatable action that you're taking? Where can you find experts to help you build a more comprehensive checklist? And as I said before, very important, do research on the professional. Get a checklist. Make sure they actually have had success in the area that you're looking to have success in. And if they have a checklist, great. That's exactly what you want. Because then you can repeat their checklist and hopefully get at least some of the same results that they have. And also, how can you help yourself trust the system? And what I would say is to create a living, breathing checklist for yourself right now And the more times you play it out, the more confident you get in that system. The more times you spend actually working the system, the more you can trust the system. And if you don't already have a checklist, you can obviously go out and look for some of those professionals that have a checklist that you can follow. And the final part is really going back to the power of checklists and relaxing and doing the job. But specifically, we're going to talk about shining your light. And the quote that brought this one forward was, when an aware person, someone who knows and realizes that they are creative energy itself, right, we talked about that before, realizes that the sale of their services have been neglected, resulting in a lower income, they simply turn the light, their creative energy, towards the sales problem. So if you've ever been in business and you realized, man, I got this great product, I got this great service, I've been doing a lot of marketing, but my sales have been slumping. I haven't been making the type of money that I desire to make. What you simply need to do is turn your attention towards that specific problem. But again, this can be applied to almost anywhere in your life, almost anything in your life. The first step is just to become aware that you have that problem. Become aware of the problem. And whatever you give your attention to grows. It's not just some positive slogan. It's how the world actually works. And I think we can all agree that the more we put our attention on something in particular, the more likely we are to be able to become successful in whatever endeavor we're going out to accomplish. The more you become aware that you are infinite, creative energy, the more you can see yourself as the light. And we come back all the way to believing in ourselves once again. Think about the way the gardener uses a grow light. We're going back to the gardening analogy again here. Sometimes a plant light, a grow light, makes it easy to grow plants indoors. Grow lights are used for horticulture, indoor gardening, indoor hydroponics, etc. Shine a grow light on your indoor plant and you ignite enough photosynthesis for the plant to grow. Very interesting. Even if you have a plant in the darkest of places, if you have a grow light, if you put your attention on it, the plant will grow, even if it's not in the sun. Creativity is just like that light. You can shine your grow light anywhere, on your business, on your relationships, on your exercise routine, or on your music and on your education. And that's what I was talking about before. Very interesting that you can use this same principle on any area of your life. And then the questions that you can ask yourself are, do you want something to grow in your life? Shine the light of awareness on it. And then let the creativity flow through you as you are the creator. And what you can do is you can remember these two questions to ask yourself. What would you like to see more of in your life? And then how can you shine a little more light on that thing? How can you put a little bit more attention on that thing? So that was the end of the mind map for Creator by Steve Chandler. Very excited to bring this book to you. Hopefully we'll do some more books on Steve Chandler. And thanks for being with me today. I recommend you go and check out some of the links down below. We'll see you again next time. Thanks.